Hi, it's been an absolute privilege to be asked to do something like this for the Friends of GRI. I think my career has started here in the Royal Infirmary. My mum before me, interestingly, she worked here and then she was a fever nurse in Ruckhill. So maybe it's just always been in my blood, although I did actually want to be a PE teacher. However, I started my training many years ago as a psychiatric nurse, and that was based at Gartlock Hospital with the Eastern College of Nursing. I worked there for quite some time, and actually it was the beginning of the modular system. And we used to do 13-week modules. We were one of the first groups to do that. And my very first ward was actually Ward 2 here. And it was a Sister Jackie Wright. And I think actually Jackie may still be here. I think she went on to do palliative care. But I have to say, I think Jackie was certainly my inspiration from the word go. I remember the very first person that ever died, and just going with Sister Wright at that time and understanding the compassion and the empathy and, you know, the way she handled everything. And I hope that in my career I have certainly learned, and I have done that with every patient, not only in life but in death, and I've taught that to other people as I have gone through my career. That was a real inspiration, I would say, that ward, and it was actually interesting to hear that actually Sister Wright went on to work in palliative care. However, I took a totally different view and actually ended up I finished my training at Gartlock and went on to then work in Duke Street Hospital as a staff nurse, and then went on to do my conversion training, whereby I ended up in the Royal. My initial where I wished to be was actually a surgical unit. That was want to be my first post, and that's what I was interviewed for. And back then there was actually believe it or not, there was no vacancies there. So I ended up in the emergency department. And again, I have great memories of the old building. They call it the Gatehouse now. The Gatehouse then, and it's still the Gatehouse. And actually, funnily enough, we've gone a big 360 move, and we now are back in the Gatehouse, having started there. We now have minor injuries back there. And again, we have to mention COVID through this, but that is actually just through COVID footfall, etc. We now have the minor injuries down there. So I think some of my best days, I have to say, some of the funniest days, some of the saddest days, some of the craziest days were in that department. I think, a few people I do have to mention was certainly Mr Swann, who was our consultant. There was only, I think, 2 consultants. One of my colleagues will be coming on hopefully after me, and she will tell you a wee bit more and better memories around who was his predecessor. But when I started, it was Mr Simpson, who was a hand surgeon at the time, but also did emergency medicine or trauma or casualty, as it was then, and Mr Swann. And Mr Swann, actually, he was very pivotal in the whole of Glasgow, essentially, for his work in head injuries. I think, I have great and fond memories of him. And, to this day, I still keep in contact with him, even though he's retired. He was inspirational in lots of ways with head injuries. But also, I think, he always used to carry a bar of soap, if I remember correctly, in his white coat pocket, when he did his ward rounds for the head injuries, and he would get them all to have a wee sniff at the soap to see if they denosed me or not. The other thing which I do remember Mr Swann about was actually, no matter what came in and what emergency came in the famous room 9, and no matter who was in these rooms, you had Mr Swann just saying, "Could you just set me up for a cut down, please?" And a cut down was always, you always did that usually on the leg, at the ankle, and it was a special sort of set where you could actually hook up a vein and then just put a line into the vein. Now, obviously, we didn't have ultrasound scanning then, and when you look back, things have changed so much. We didn't even have a CT scanner, if I remember correctly, way back. And if somebody was going for a CT scan, you took them over to the Southern General, in an ambulance, and it was. When you look back, it's, we've come on so far. Imaging now is just absolute, pivotal to just about everything we do now. So looking back then, it's quite different. I think, again, my memories of starting out as an emergency, nurse, as a staff nurse is, how we have come on so far. We've come on because of preventative medicine. You think of cardiac medicine and respiratory medicine and all the preventions that we've now got in place. We just do not see the amount of things like MIs and LVFs and really sick individuals coming in because of actually what we're now doing to prevent these people coming in. And again, I was thinking about things like standbys coming in, the emergency calls we used to get in. Used to be a great big crazy phone on a wall that was like a dinner school bell that rang out and you lifted it, and it was just a case of you were getting a cardiac arrest in or a road traffic accident. But actually now we get so much more detail, and actually we get their observations and we get, what they're like just now. And actually sometimes we don't even get them because they go directly to the Jubilee Hospital now. So things have improved massively in terms of prevention and what we now get into emergency medicine. I think other huge areas I think I have seen is around violence. Unfortunately, we have, just recently we had quite an incident there just on Saturday, which, again, I would say is quite unusual. We don't have that same amount of violence any longer. I think there was lots of work done way back probably in the 80s and early 90s with the Violence Reduction Unit, and we worked really hard with them and our own medics. We went into schools. There was a lot of prevention. I think a lot of laws have changed and a real focus on violence. And I think one story which I will actually mention many years ago, and again my colleague Hilda will definitely remember this, and it was a letter that we got on a Monday morning from a GP, which basically really said, dear doctor or casualty officer or whoever, Mr Smith has come up this morning and he has got obviously got a broken wrist, and he was actually up in your department on Saturday night, and it wasn't the fact that there was a huge queue, or it wasn't the fact there was a woman half naked running about the waiting room, but it just all became too much for him when the man sitting next to him got stabbed and the man left, clearly. So, the man had left, and again, when you look at some of the incidents that we had back then, it was, it's very different now. It's a very different model we work with, although it is still there. It absolutely is still there. So I think, when looking back, things like uniforms have changed. When I started, it was all the white dresses, and then when I got my first sister's post, it was a nice blue uniform, and I always remember getting given my first frilly cap, and I was so proud of it. And I've still got that cap, but I've got no starch because I was actually going to bring it in, but I had no starch to starch it. So I've not brought it. And then we went into a bit of a crazy outfit which looked like a shell suit, and it was meant to be like water resistant, and it had long sleeves, and it was just a big blue suit, and it had the GRI emblem on it. And then we've obviously moved on. We went on into scrubs after that, and that wasn't deemed ideal, and now we're in the national uniform. So looking back, there's been an array of uniforms, but the one thing I do remember is certainly, it's now Sister Morrison, who has since retired, but she used to be Sister Smith and Sister Curry. When I started, they always wore their navy, and they had the lovely ruffle cuffs, which was a great memory, and you just always think the Royal Infirmary when you see that. Well, I do. So lots of really amazing things have happened over the years. I think the other thing which I will actually say on this was I did actually meet my husband there 30 years ago. 30 years ago this year. Maybe you better cut that bit out. But I think it's been a real my life has been very much involved in the Royal, and both personally and obviously my whole career really has worked around it. I've been away and done also different things, but I think my own two boys just know that I'm near enough married to the place, as well as my own husband. But at the end of the day, it has been my great pleasure to work here, and I am still honoured to be here and be part of the Royal Infirmary. Thank you.